Lori, you had a recent report in the New York Times. You contributed a story talking about masks in schools, specifically in Detroit. What were you finding there? And where are we now with lifting that mask mandate?
On the situation with mask mandates, I think what we're seeing around Michigan is that most, if not all, districts have either loosened their mask mandates or eliminated them completely. One of the districts that has continued with this mask mandate is the Detroit Public Schools Community District. Their thinking is that they want to wait until after spring break to see, kids are going to be traveling. Last year, there was a surge after spring break. So there is a concern that that might happen again this year. We also know that there's another variant out there that hasn't really affected Michigan and the US as much as it has in some European countries, but there's that fear that it could happen. And so, Detroit doesn't want to lift this mask mandate and then have to reinstate it, 2 weeks later because suddenly there are a lot of cases. So they will have a pretty good sense of where things stand within like the first week or two of the return from spring break. They do return on April 4th.
Well, the other people to consider are the teachers in all of this. Different in different districts, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I think the teachers that I've talked to particularly, and I've talked to a lot of teachers in Detroit in particular, they're concerned in part because the vaccination rates are so low in the city. Very few adults are getting vaccinated and very few kids are getting vaccinated. And so they may feel comfortable with themselves being vaccinated, but they're worried about, the classroom. I spent a little bit of time in a kindergarten classroom about a month or so ago for the New York Times story. And the teacher that I spent time with, she was wearing 2 masks. And it's a difficult thing, wearing a mask, because especially when you're a kindergarten teacher trying to teach language, trying to teach kids how to sound out a word. And some of that comes through by watching someone speak, watching someone say a letter. So there was one time or a couple of times where she went to the far edge of the room and pulled her mask down so that the kids could see how she forms the ch sound, because the kids have to get it.
Another issue, perhaps a crisis, not enough teachers.
The Michigan Education Association says, what they're experiencing right now is a crisis.
Another story that comes up a lot is this teacher shortage. And how do you term that? Is it a crisis?
I think that the term crisis could apply in some districts. I don't know that we can say that there's a crisis across the board.
So there's more teachers now than since 2007-08.
Tom Gantert's at the right-leaning Michigan Capital Confidential looking into teacher staffing issues, filing Freedom of Information requests to see where school districts really stand regarding recruitment and job offerings. Is it a crisis?
We've done dozens and dozens of stories on this dating back to 2017. I would say it's questionable if there is even a teacher shortage. If you go by the data, I would say there's more of a pupil shortage in Michigan than a teacher shortage.
Less students in Michigan overall. We're a shrinking population, so less teachers too. But in the latest pandemic year, staffing's up 3%. That's what the nonpartisan Citizens Research Council of Michigan found. And the student staffing ratio has dropped some. That's considered good. But the group has taken notice of Governor Whitmer's plan to boost teachers' pay across the board.
The largest component in the school aid section of that spending plan is a $1.5 billion employee retention bonus.
Every educator would get many thousands in pay boosts the next few years, whether their district is hurting from the teacher shortage or not.
The key is to acknowledge that this is a highly localized problem, and that the experience in one district isn't exactly or nearly the same as it is in another district and another part of the state. We just don't know that a statewide retention bonus program is the best way to approach that problem.
Without a doubt, there are shortages in some areas. For instance, special education, foreign languages, some of the more advanced placement classes.
Chalkbeat Lori Higgins can add to that list.
We're now seeing some other areas that we never really had shortages in, like English language arts, art and music education, elementary education. Those, we were overproducing in some of those areas.
Well, that brings up this other area with substitute teachers. Where are we now with that? There's a shortage with them too.
Yeah, I mean, the substitute shortage, I mean, we could probably term that a crisis. I think that every district is struggling with subs.
At the beginning of the school year, I would say that it was a crisis. Yes, it was a crisis because
Dani Montini supplies subs for schools. She's with Midwest Guest Teacher Staffing in Farmington Hills, still coming up short finding the right people.
We had a lot of candidates that came to us and wanted to do virtual, where the schools wanted placements in facilities.
Pay for subs, or call them guest teachers, higher now. Pre-pandemic, the pay was $100 a day.
Through our firm, we pay them $135 daily rate.
And how many hours a day of work do they do for that?
6 to 8 hours. Many times you'll call them and they're unwilling or unable to meet the need.
So, teaching, going out of style? The Michigan Education Association commissioned a study.
This survey proves what we already knew.
They're talking job satisfaction. Make that dissatisfaction.
And we've seen a pretty dramatic drop in educators' job satisfaction.
It's not a desirable field like it used to be. There's just too many other options that they can make a lot more money and have a lot less headaches.
The MEA, the teachers union, their survey released in February showed 20% now want a different career. Consider that along with other data showing fewer coming out of college with education degrees.
I think crisis may not necessarily be the right term right now, but I think that if Michigan isn't able to figure out a way to sort of stem the shortages, that we could be heading into a crisis. What about 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line? Will people, as they reach retirement age, decide, you know, this is enough for me, I'm done with teaching? We don't know. And I think, you know, if we don't address these things now, like, we could be in a serious crisis.
The Detroit Regional Chamber's annual report on the state of education reveals an urgent need to reduce the racial equity gap and increase the number of students who attain a post-secondary degree. According to the report, the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to further weaken the region's already challenging talent pipeline. Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal sat down to discuss the findings in the report and the long-term impact on the future workforce.